Hi everyone. I'm so excited to be with you tonight. Today, the actual reason I'm in a t-shirt is because I moved into a new house today, but I made sure my bookshelves were lined for this evening so that you all could have a nice background to look at. It's not fake, it's real. Blood, sweat, and tears to get it up for you guys, but it is there. So I thought when we were thinking about what topics to cover for Elul, for even though Elul is now over, um, Tzedek or justice was really on my mind this summer and as we headed into the holidays. And I thought that I would share with you. Does anybody know what Safaria is? Safaria is the online database of all Jewish texts, almost any text in Hebrew and many texts in English. And my most famous source sheet is called Tzedek Tirdof in context. Justice, justice, you shall pursue in context of the Torah. And I thought that I would share this with you all tonight. Since we decided, Justice Ginsburg died, and she had Tzedek Tirdof in her office. And it just adds like an extra flavor of what we're looking at tonight, especially when we're thinking about judges and courts. To have her in the back of our minds as this person who just exhibited all our highest ideals as a Jewish person. Whether you believed everything she did or not, she was a really amazing person that I think most of us look up to. So keep her in the back of your mind as we're thinking tonight. I'm going to share my screen share this page with you. Can everybody see it? The trouble with sharing a screen is that I now can't see all your beautiful faces, but we'll fix that. I'm gonna just scroll down. So, sorry, I was at the bottom here. So, Tzedek Tirdof in context. Where does this phrase come from? This phrase comes from Deuteronomy 16, specifically in 18 to 20.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Alex? I don't know if it's small for other.
Oops, that's the opposite of what you told me to do. Let's see here. Better?
Is that better?
All right.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting nods. Okay, cool.
So will somebody read Deuteronomy 16, this phrase right here in the English? Just unmute yourself and read.
You shall appoint magistrates and officials for your tribes in all the settlements that Adonai your God is giving you, and they shall govern the people with due justice. You shall not judge unfairly. You shall show no partiality. You shall not take bribes, for bribes blind the eyes of the discerning and upset the plea of the just. Justice, justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that Adonai your God is giving you.
Amazing. So let me, oops. How do I come on screen? It won't let me get out of this now. Oh, here you are. Okay, now I can see your faces again. So I am curious. I know you can't see the screen right now, but that's because I want to see your faces. So I'm going to copy this into the chat if you want to check it out. What stood out about these few verses of Torah? Specifically that surrounding this phrase, justice, justice that shall you pursue, that we usually take out and we just say, this is an amazing little catchphrase, a little quip. We love this. What about the rest of it? Did anything stand out?
Well, both Bob and I worked for a court system, so I think it's good that they establish courts. That's a really good way to pursue justice. I mean, Bob may disagree, but it's a good way to have a protocol for justice to make sure things are not left to the humans to fist fight it out or do anything worse than that.
Beautiful. Rabbi.
The no bribe taking, I think that's so important to have, fair and equal justice, and that it discourages the folks who are at a disadvantage in the court system. So that's a very powerful statement.
Great.
Two things that struck me. One was kind of the flip side of what Rabbi said, is that bribes even tarnish the image of the people who are already deserve to win, because it discourages people's trust in the process by which they won. And that is a really sophisticated concept. And the second thing that maybe you'll talk about, if I had to give a reason for having justice, I'm not sure that occupying the land that God shall give you is the reason that I would give. So I'm not sure where that goes.
Great.
But those are the two things that that I thought was unexpected.
Thanks, Bob.
I'm not unexpected for the latter, but I'm not sure it's a good reason. Well, yeah, we'll stop.
Anyone else?
I'm interested in the repetition of the word tzedek, tzedek, tzedek.
Great. So jumping ahead a little bit, we're going to go through commentators from Rashi till like 19th century, Rashi being 10th, 11th century. And we're going to look at how all these people and all these amazing Torah commentators in all these different lands, how did they understand Tzedek, Tzedek, Tirdof? And we're going to see as we go through what different people in different lands thought about this, specifically the repetition, Nancy, but also in general, like what is this concept? So the one thing that I want to address, all these are really great points, but the point was of Bob's, of why would Tzedek, Tirdof just occupy the land? Like what? So if before you are given this amazing gift, this is the Torah's perspective, before you're given this amazing gift, the land, Eretz Yisrael, of milk and honey, the first thing you have to do before you get that gift, before you even receive it, is act with justice. I'm going to share something from some professor I had along the way that I can never remember, but I feel the need to say this b'shem omro, like in that person's name, because it's not my idea. But we can think of the Torah not as a book of the creation of the universe, not a book that goes back to Big Bang, not that says everything that happened here before this book was written there wasn't anything. Instead, what we can look at is that there was human history that led us to a point where mythic narratives started being shared. And people came up with this idea that, there's all this chaos. There's all these little tribes constantly at war with each other. There's all these people who seem to not get along in this very little piece, this little tiny piece of land. What if we said everyone had one God? What if everyone lived with one ancestor, Adam? What if? And they made a story that created this world. They made this world into being by saying, we are all from the same people. There is no multiple gods. There's one God of all of us. And when you fast forward from that understanding of Torah to this, before we occupy the land, before we do anything with God's gifts, we have to act justly. And there's a thread there that is very clear. From going from chaos, what's the opposite of chaos? Justice, right? Fairness. So I'm going to go back in. That's my read. Now let's go back in and see what some of the other texts teach us about, or what some of the other commentators teach us about this phrase. So the first one, as I said, is Rashi. And Rashi understands this as seek out a good court. Rashi gives us the pshat, the very specific, pragmatic read. Exactly what does this phrase of Torah means? It means that you should seek out a good court. Now, let's dive a little deeper, because this is Bob's question also. right? What do we have to do to get the land? We have to pursue justice. And Rashi says that this phrase means that the appointment of proper judges is sufficient to make Israel thrive and to establish them on their land. So I'm going to give everyone a second to look at those two phrases. Rashi, the first one on specifically Tzedek, Tirdof, seek out a good court. And a little bit later, that you may thrive and occupy the land. Rashi says the appointment of proper judges is sufficient to make Israel thrive and establish them on their land. So I'm going to ask one question for all the texts, which is that how you envision Tzedek, Tirdof today? Or justice, justice you shall pursue as a Jewish person? What are the things that you find in common with that? And where doesn't it go enough? Or where does it go too far? Right? How do we compare our understanding of the catchphrase that hangs on many synagogue walls, many office walls, from this idea of Rashi that seems very pragmatic, seek out good courts, and if you establish judges, then you can occupy the land and receive them. Does anybody have any thoughts on this?
It's Bob again. If I could just, so as Sharon pointed out, both she and I worked for an appellate courts, and I don't know if Sharon would agree with this, but when we got an appeal, when at least where I worked, when we got an appeal into our court, first question I would ask before we looked at anything else was, who is the judge below? Who is the judge who decided the case? Was that judge a good or fair judge, or was that one of our judges who would give rise to a lot of the appeals? So I don't know if that goes along with Rashi's court, but I think the nature of the person who is dispensing the justice and the values that that person holds are really essential to that outcome.
Great. Thank you, Bob. And even those of us not in the legal system and just watch enough cop shows, we know that one of the first questions they're concerned with is who's the judge. So maybe that part of the TV show is accurate. Any other thoughts about Rashi?
Alan, I think you're unmuted.
Yeah, I am. My initial impression, just reading Rashi there, was, gosh, that's kind of simplistic and dumbing it down, but which is absurd when you think of Rashi, since there's very few human beings who ever lived who are more perceptive. I think what he's done is he's boiled it down to essentials. Of course, you have to have good judges, and of course that is connected to your thriving in the land. How could it not be? You have to have justice. You have to have fairness. Otherwise, there's no security in life. There's no liberty. There's no property. Any society has to be based on justice. And that, I think, is he's simply assuming it. Of course, what do you do to implement that? You get good judges.
Yep. Right. In some ways, it's a linchpin argument. Without these things, no further justice, no big picture justice can happen. You have to do the pragmatic things first to enact a system that can build justice in a systemic, societal-wide way. Yeah, Rabbi.
Well, I mean, certainly I won't argue with Alan, who is also an attorney, as well as, of course, Rashi. However, I think the tzedek is also for us on an individual level. I mean, part of our, the themes of the whole High Holy Days, and especially the prayers on Yom Kippur, is, teshuvah, tefillah, tzedakah, tzedek. And so that's on an individual level that we also have to pursue justice, not only in a broader societal court system. So I think that's perhaps what is also hopefully being addressed, or people are encouraged to pursue themselves, as well as at the level of a court, which is on a different level than personally what you carry out in your own life.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. But and that really is two sides of the same coin from Alan's argument, right? Like, it starts with the small things that lead to big enactment of justice, right? You got to get the right people in the right place, and the people have to be acting justly in their everyday life to create a just society, right? If selfishness rules, then we have a system that is filled with bribes and filled with injustice, right? And so how do we create this system, right? That's a question for us that we can keep wrestling with. Great. Any last thoughts about this before we head to our next commentator? All right, great. So next up is Ibn Ezra, a little after Rashi. Spanish. Will somebody read this for me? Just unmute and go for it.
Justice, justice. This is addressed to each of the contending parties. The repetition of justice implies that they should pursue a just result, whether it brings them profit or loss, or perhaps that they should continue to pursue justice time after time as long as they live. Or it may simply be for emphasis.
Thank you. So reread that to yourself real quick. And I think we'll have to go back to Nancy first to see if this is a sufficient response to your question.
I like it.
Yeah?
Yeah, I do.
Let's see. I'm just putting it back in the chat for you to make sure anybody that lost it too quickly can get it. Any other thoughts about Ibn Ezra? Is this, it reads to me, perhaps, I don't want to lead you down a path, but it reads a little naive, like to expect that two people coming into court to do battle with each other have this purest of intentions, that they're coming in and they're like, I'm not trying to beat the person next to me, I'm simply trying to pursue justice, right? Is that real? Do you think that can actually happen? And second, how does it apply to your understanding of Tzedek? Is this one better than Rashi, worse than Rashi? What do you think? Does it add to it? Alan, did you want to talk?
Yeah, I've never met a litigant who didn't think his cause was just, and that the other person was a total reprobate and deserved to be put in the lowest rung of perdition. So yeah, I mean, this in effect, of course I should win. Of course my position about this should prevail. So no, I don't think it's appealing to people where they are and where they're at.
I agree with Al. I kind of think it runs counter to our American adversarial system, where the party supposed to just pursue their positions. But I think on second thought, when thinking about it further, I think it maybe can be reinterpreted to say at least you should act justly in pursuit of your cause. You don't necessarily have to give up your cause, but you have to be honest and forthright about the means that you use to achieve it. And then I think it would work within our current American system of judicial process.
Thanks, Bob. Sharon?
I agree with Alan and Bob, but I would also say maybe, given that each side thinks that her side is just, to look at the possibility that the other side also thinks that her pursuit is also just, and that can lead to compromise. And we do have compromise as Bob was saying before, that we think of the adversarial system, but also within our adversarial system we have settlement conferences and we have mediation, And this makes me think about, well, yes, you believe that you're just, but the other person also sees themselves as being just. And so maybe we can compromise.
Great. I'm actually thinking, obviously, this is me being a non-legal person and just watching movies about lawyers. But I'm thinking of when lawyers go in to do the the research of what the other team might be coming up with, right? And they list all the possibilities of what they're going to argue about, why their opponent is doing this in search of Tzedek and all of, or not Tzedek, but why they're right, right? And it's interesting because you're right, they both really do believe that they're right, you know? So how do we create a society, or is it possible in American society, to Bob's point, of this adversarial nature, and also in Israel too, right, Neve? Adversarial nature. Everyone say hi to our new Israel fellow, Neve. He's on our call and he's the best. So Tzedek here, I love the last sentence of Ibn Ezra's thing. Maybe it's just for emphasis. Like maybe we just really want some tzedek in our new society that we're trying to create before we enter the land. Maybe that's all it is, right? We can come up with fanciful answers, but maybe tzedek is the foundation of our society and we must emphasize it, right? So,
Now,
yeah.
the past week in Louisville, Breonna Taylor's grand jury came to the result that they did. And I thought the prosecutor who gave public remarks was extremely eloquent. He talked about the limitation of the law and that justice was not necessarily served, but that they had to follow the law. And I like this being an expectation within our religious legal system that we need to keep justice in mind, not simply the legal rules.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's important to remember that in almost all cases, Jews in all affairs, are working within Jewish courts. They're not working in some kind of extra religious courts. They're almost always left to Beit Dins, to Jewish courts. And so that's very different than the system we're talking about today, but it's important to think about what they're talking about and also the world we live in, right? Perhaps even more important to talk about the world we live in. It's important to understand the context that in almost all cases, what Ibn Ezra and Rashi are talking about are inter-affairs, not intra-affairs with non-Jewish courts. But for us, it's very important that we apply Tzedek and our ideas of what that means to the broader picture. So let's jump in time. We're going to go forward, casual 600 years. And we're going to look at another teacher. So will somebody read this one? Just jump in.
The great Musar rabbis say that if one hastens to give tzedakah, it is worth double, as if one gave tzedakah twice. Tzedek, tzedek, it will be considered as two tzedakahs. If, quote, you pursue, close quote it, if you try to give it as soon as possible.
Great. So now we're
Let
going
me go on.
to a different part of the world, in Palestine and like North Africa influenced Europe. And we get the very different read of this, right? Musar, the tradition of Musar is the ethical Judaism that Rabbi Aaron really loves. I love it too. But its love predates me at Hillel. And I think that this is a really beautiful teaching. It almost takes us out of the court idea completely, right? I hope everyone had a chance to read that one. It takes us into a very, as we were just talking about, who just said something about personal? Somebody did.
I have a question. Is the two Hebrew words the same? Tzedek, the tzedakah, tzedek, and tzedek justice. Are they the same English translation?
They're not the same English translation. They're from the same group. So, oftentimes when rabbis are drashing, so tzedakah might be better translated as like righteousness or justiceness, so that you can do tzedakah without simply giving money. But there's a I don't know how many centuries it's been accepted as just like charity or translated as charity, but it's actually a bigger concept than that. You can do tzedek by taking care of the poor, not just giving money to let somebody else take care of the poor, right? Both things are tzedakah. So tzedek comes from the idea that everyone is equal, and people obviously have different lived experiences, but in the eyes of religion, no one should be destitute. Nobody should be completely down and out. And society's job to take care of people who have had bad luck. So tzedakah comes into kind of that side of it generally, but really it's about pursuing justice more broadly.
Is the word justice and righteous the same Hebrew word?
Neve?
So yes, if you would say that in Hebrew, we will understand. It is the same word.
I'm so glad you're here today. Yeah, the translation into English gets a little tricky. I think the most important thing is that this other concept that's very familiar to us is rooted in justice, is rooted in tzedek, right? Everyone knows tzedakah. Tzedek is many people know tzedek, but I think even more people know tzedakah. Like any kid that grew up at religious school or something was told to bring $1 for tzedakah every Sunday or whatever. More so than I think they would know tzedek, Tirdof. Neve, did you have something to add?
Yeah, just the word tzedek and tzedakah, the only difference between those two is the hey in the end. And hey represents God. So tzedek and tzedakah are the same word, and what changes is the hey of God. Like Avram was Ibrahim, right? The age always represent that. What?
You're such a rabbi.
It's a longer drash, but just so we can keep that in mind, the meaning of the hey when added to a word.
Here, wait, let me add another drash to that. And Neve, you can tell me if this is completely made up or not, but hey is also directional. So if you say like kadima, it means you're going forward. So tzedakah could mean towards tzedek. So acts that are towards finding justice are tzedakah, not just giving money, although that's one way, but anything. Does that track, Neve? Nice. Okay. Any thoughts on this little tangent? Did I answer your question, Jill? Or are you still confused? I feel like we went down a rabbit hole that might have been more confusing. All right.
No, that's amazing. I'm so glad you taught me this today. It's amazing. Going towards justice.
A rabbit hole and a
really
rabbi.
coming up with that right now.
It just occurred to me that a rabbit hole and a rabbi hole there's only one letter that separates the two.
Basically the same thing. Okay. Neve liked your joke, Bob, which is dangerous.
I swear I did, dude.
Okay, so
Since
yeah.
I talked about myself personally, I'll also say that when I was growing up, tzedakah always meant charity. and tzedek meant be charitable, and I didn't get to the justice part until I became a lawyer. So maybe that's what kids are still learning.
Yeah, I think that's probably common. Ravid?
So I'm not a Hebrew scholar by any means, but I thought tzedakah also means righteousness and comes also from the concept of uprightness, straightness. Zadik katamar, straight like a palm. And so I think that's part of what we're talking about on different levels.
Beautiful. How many different drashot can we give on Tzedek? We're only like 30 minutes in.
Rabbi Alex, I have a question. Maybe you know, because I don't. Why it uses twice, tzedek, tzedek?
Well, that's one of the things we're looking at. Ibn Ezra said perhaps just for emphasis. Also, perhaps justice is addressing two people in court. Rashi doesn't address the double part, but
Maybe it's the double meanings.
there you go. All right, let's check out our next text. Actually, these are our last two texts, and I want to read them together and then kind of see where our conversation goes. So will somebody read both of these texts? First by Rav Simcha Bonham of Sikha, and then Drashot Elami.
Tony, do you want to read? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay. Justice, justice you shall pursue. With justice you shall pursue justice. Even the pursuit of justice must employ only just means and not falsehood. Justice, justice you shall pursue. Justice alone is not enough, because there are many types of justice, just as there are many kinds of truth. Every regime has its own justice. The Torah therefore stresses, justice, justice you shall pursue, namely the musar, ethic of justice, where both the means and the ends are just.
I'll give you 1 second to reread those two. Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Please.
About the first one I read, where it says that you can't have falsehood, that you have to pursue it with truth and not falsehood. What about little white lies? What about telling somebody their hair looks great when it looks terrible, especially if they ask you?
That's not justice. That's social niceties.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I think when we're not necessarily talking about a court, but they did talk about the court system, and we're talking about righteousness. And I think that social niceties can really go a long way to binding a community together. So if you tell a bride, in the Talmud it says every bride is beautiful, and either every bride really is beautiful, or you better say that anyway, because it binds the community better than if you said you are the ugliest bride I've ever seen. So I think little white lies are very different from justice. It's not like in the 10 Commandments. I think this is something else. And when you talk about falsehoods, I think more like the bad laws. So in Germany, it was illegal to be Jewish, right? It was illegal in the US for a Black and a white person to marry. So to me, it's like, well, those kinds of laws cannot be enforced when ethically they're wrong. They're wrong internally. I mean, not internally. maybe universally wrong. You know, this is something in Judaism we would never see. Everyone's made in God's image. So I think that there's certain laws, even though that they are laws, they're not just. And so you have to have a just law. And I think, to me, the falsehood refers to that, an unjust law.
Well,
I just want to draw a line from what Sharon just said to what Nancy said earlier about the Breonna Taylor thing, decision, that here we see in Drashot LME, there's many types of justice, right? There's the legal type of justice. This is the justice of what our law allows. But that might not align with us as spiritual beings, as religious beings. This doesn't seem just in a religious sense. It might seem just in a court sense because our law codes haven't caught up with the justice we seek. But this is where multiple quote unquote justices come in, right? In one way. Did Marie, did you want to say something?
Can I just finish my question about falsehoods? Can I just finish my question about falsehoods if I'm still maybe unmuted?
No, you're unmuted. Go for it.
A question about falsehoods. You're right. I had a bad example. But I think that said also there's many kinds of justice, just like there's several kinds of truths. And you might have the spiritual justice, you might have the legal justice. But there's also probably a different sense of what's false and what's not. And depending, someone sees something and then someone sees the same thing. That's why eyewitnesses are very unreliable. And I just wonder that where the relativity stops and where there's an absolute. And I'm not clear over time that there's ever an absolute. I mean, I don't know that there is, because it seems the more that you delve into history, the more you find that what you think is absolute wasn't absolute. So that's just my question. I don't certainly have an answer. But when they—
Very good question, right? Like you're right. You don't have an answer, but none of us have an answer to, right? How we as beings change over time and how we understand things through experience changes vastly. And so how do we apply justice to being, like, how do we ask someone to apply justice through their lens of experience to other people who have completely different understandings of experience? And I think the answer is we try our best, right? There is no perfect answer, but this is messy. Right? We're trying to go from chaos, which apparently is some kind of natural human state, to a just society, which is not easy. And obviously it's not easy because for thousands of years, we've now been struggling with the same things that our books, our Torah, talk about thousands of years ago. Why are we still struggling with them? Shouldn't we have been perfected? No, we're messy, we're chaotic. That's what we are, and we need goalposts to help us live better, more just lives, but we're still not there where we want to be yet. There's lots of hands. I saw Alan unmute. Alan, are you there?
Yeah. I would not say that the ordinary situation of people is chaos. I think probably the more typical thing in human history is arbitrary authoritarianism. And in that context, this is incredible revolutionary concept. The idea that there is a justice out there. There may be some absolute justice. Our ability to apprehend that absolute justice is of course impossible. It's imperfect. The paradigm I always use, one of my favorite movies is Rashomon, 1950 Japanese movie by Kurosawa, about a death and various characters, and each of the characters sees the events that play out utterly different. It's as though there's actually 5 different realities in this movie. Mm. And it's a shocking movie, but the point is not, I don't think for me, is despair. It's humility, to question our own ability to see the truth, to see justice, to see perfectly, and therefore to strive for it. So
beautiful.
The point is we have to place our faith in in a system, in a judicial system, that at least we can have the confidence that people will try their very best to apprehend what is just, what really happened, and what is the just solution in the particulars.
Thank you. One of the things I thought about while you were speaking was the idea that Rambam, Maimonides, has of only understanding, my daughter, only having a glimpse of the divine. We only have these divine sparks of illumination, and we can only grasp a little bit of that divine perfection as humans, even though we continued to try. Arya, can you go back outside, please? Thank you. Love you. Yeah, divine sparks, Maimonides, justice, Tzedek, Tzedek. Ravid, I saw you put your hand up a while ago.
So I want to bring this idea of, I guess that's implied in what the last drashot El Amis says, and that's on a sort of on an everyday level, particularly the way, at least ideally, our court system works, is fairness and not in terms of falsehood, hiding evidence if you're in a court, a case. And so there's this process of discovery, and again, our attorneys can comment on this. And also that some cases are thrown out because at least the prosecution, which the government has hidden information that would be exculpatory for the defendant. And so that lack of fairness, that lack of justice in being fair and, where both the means and the ends are just. And so I think some of that maybe is some of the underpinning of some of our law here in the US.
Yeah, thank you. Sharon.
So jumping off from the Breonna Taylor comment that it's not the right kind of justice. I think we can think of justice and maybe in two ways, and maybe this has something to do with why the word is repeated. So there's the moral justice and what's right and what's ethical. And then there's the procedure. There's a process to get to try to ensure that justice is done. Now, whether that's accomplished 80% of the time or 50% of the time or 99% of the time, we don't know. But what I see here for Breonna Taylor is that maybe all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. They did everything according to the plan, according to the protocol, I mean. And that protocol generally assures that the process is fair and just, but it does not necessarily mean that the outcome is just. It could be two different standards.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it was set up that way, but that could happen. And I've seen it happen where you go, well, all these things went step by step by step in the protocol, and still it seems like the wrong answer.
Thanks.
So don't you think then that there's that it's fair to say that at times, at least, that whoever or whatever happens to be in power is who decides what's just? So just like the victor's right to history, that the current power structure, whatever that is, may decide what's just, and then the next current power structure decides what's just, and it can be 180 degrees different.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comment, Tony, goes into conversation with Alan's comment about arbitrary authoritarianism.
Right, exactly.
Right, that humans are not perfect creatures. And so sometimes we fall into these really vicious, painful periods where we treat each other horribly. And it's not just. And the people making the laws are specifically writing them for their advantage at the disadvantage of others. And we still have laws like that today, right? And that's the challenging part, especially where that dissonance is so great between what we expect morally, what we are taught religiously, what seeking justice means, and then what we get from the justice system. They're sometimes very disparate, painfully so. And the process to change them is so slow sometimes, oftentimes, almost always.
If I could just interject.
Please.
Two observations. One, a bias. I was in the California judicial system for 20 years, and I did not know that Torah commentators talked about process, and I really appreciate the last two readings that we had, because from my experience in the judicial system, process is as important as outcome, and process shouldn't necessarily be outcome determinative. And I think that's what a lot of people have been so upset about, what seems to be happening to the federal judicial system. Something that I don't think is happening in California. I worked in Orange County, which is a Republican county, Republican justices and judges. But from my personal experience, I do think that by and large, the ethic was that people tried to be open and transparent, and the chips would just fall where they would, giving the people the opportunity to speak and to be heard. And my second point is, I just finished, well, I didn't finish, I was excused. I was on a federal grand jury. And I don't think when we're talking about process and justice, a grand jury, which is, as the saying goes, a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. I guess it's not in a Jewish concept. If it's totally one-sided. You only hear from the prosecution, and it's a quirky part of our process. The fact that ordinary citizens are called upon to be grand jurors and who can question, they don't have an independent basis to do it. They hear what the prosecutors present to them, but I don't think we should necessarily be making overreaching judgments about the judicial system from what happens in a grand jury. That's supposedly the start of the criminal process. It doesn't determine the outcome, and one hopes and one should try that there would be a fair and open trial once it happens. It's obviously not very perfect, but that's my 5 cents.
Thanks, Bob. So the debate starts in 6 minutes. I'm sure some of you want to go. Perhaps this is a really powerful framing for the debate. Perhaps the question we ask ourselves is, how is our country pursuing justice? How do we go towards justice with all of this in mind, with fairness in mind? And perhaps the thing that you vote on is tzedek. Tzedek, tzedek, you shall pursue. Perhaps that also means at the ballot box or with your mail-in ballot, since most of us are probably in California. Significantly less fun. I hope I get a sticker, but still wonderful that we do that and make it so accessible. So I just want to see a thumbs up from everybody. Share some positivity before we go. I hope this was meaningful. Before you leave, if you want to pull it back up, you can, the link is in the chat box. Also, if you just Google Tzedek, Tirdof in context, all in English, that source sheet will pop up. It's my most famous, I told you, on Safari, so I'm very proud of it. So I hope you enjoyed it. Shana Tova, I hope your holidays were really meaningful. I hope you watched all of our hard work. And if you didn't, they're on YouTube, so you can still go watch them. Sending so much love, and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Speaking as a coward, some of us, I don't know if I'm speaking alone, I would actually like an excuse not to go and watch the debate. Maybe
Now,
I'll just watch the re-recording.
Bob, I have boxes to unpack. So I can't be your excuse.
I'd like to say one further thing. May justice fall. I guess we're done.
I was like, where did Alan go?
Okay, there was something came up on the screen. May justice flow down like water, and righteousness is a mighty stream.
Amen.
What a tradition. Oh my God.
Amen, amen, amen.
Perfect
Yeah.
ending.
Yeah, soon and in our day, huh?
And in our day, may it be soon.
Yiratzon. Have a
Thank
wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you.
The international.
Thank you, Rabbi Alex. Thank you so much.
The Hillel Yom Kippur was amazing. What you guys, I mean, it was incredible. The whole, I couldn't believe it. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jill. It was definitely a team effort here, and Rabbi Alex was actually consolidated all the playlists. So he's an incredible rabbi who knows how to roll up his sleeves.
I wasn't behind the camera so much, but there's a lot of work behind the scenes this year.
Will that disappear? Will that be available for a while? Do you?
It'll be, we will make it public soon.
Yeah, we're gonna make it public. We'll make it public so people can look back.
Do you have the links, Bob?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I
Yeah,
like
I'm
the
also-
Probably
way
you probably received it way many times than you wanted to receive it.
I'm also converting them to MP3s so that I could just
Oh.
listen. And I could forward you the link to that too.
So I'm actually feeling pretty stupid because I actually didn't get the link and watched the international Hillel.
I did.
Oh,
too.
those were amazing also, in fairness.
Which were amazing, but
Those
I'm
were
sorry that I didn't see you, Rabbi
No,
Alex. So
No, ours
I'll
were
have to go back and see that.
ours were great. They were very different than what Hillel International did. What Hillel International did was really special. It was really lovely.
You know what? That's actually a really good point. I should send a follow-up to everyone who's doing Elul to say, we're now making them public if you want to look back at them, because you can just watch little piecemeal things of, here's a Dvar Torah, here's Rabbi Chaim, here's, you can.
But it's interesting that I didn't get a link for it.
You had to sign up. It was like semi-paid content. It was suggested donation-based content. So yeah, and we were grateful to have Hillel International offer free of charge. But if anyone's wondering, we did really well in the campaign, and it's gonna start our year off really strong. So we're really.
Well, you know what? Hillel International got me, and I ended up giving to Hillel UCLA. So it all worked.
It all worked. It all worked. That's great. Oh, that makes me so happy. Thank you so much for your support.
Oh no.
I couldn't find UCLA Hillel for Rosh Hashanah, but I was able to find it, and I had signed up way a long time ago, but I guess it's my email or something. And so I watched international, and I watched Alaska and Hawaii and Brazil and Argentina. But I found it for Yom Kippur, and it's amazing how the pods work together. I thought, this is obviously for young people who can understand how they take, this is number one, and it go, here's the machzor for number one, and here's the music for number one, and then you go to number two, and then you have, I thought that was just amazing, just amazingly done. So
I guess I should have stopped recording, but honestly, this is the best thing I've ever heard. So I'm delighted, and I have it for posterity now. So thank you, Sharon. And Sharon, I will add you to the email list.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, Lindsay, it's so nice to see your face. I don't think I've ever met you-ish, but it's really nice to see you. And
I'm sorry, I was at my kids' parent-teacher conference, or whatever, back to school virtual thing. So I was like waiting for that to end. But I've had the privilege of working with Alex over the summer and studying with him. And we just finalized the 10 modules, which are awesome. And they're gonna go online tomorrow. They're so interesting, and really, they work through 10 different issues that link Judaism and civic engagement. Megan really went to town on the one, why should I vote for a broken system? They're so, like, they really get into some of the tough stuff. And then I'm actually teaching, here, I'm gonna post it, Hillel at Home on Monday. So if any of, actually I'm co-teaching with the Stanford Hillel Springboard person. And it's really about the role of youth and looking at voting trends and that kind of thing. So,
oh, well, I'll have to share this with our community.
Yeah, and feel free to say, I'm an alumni, so.
Of
Right.
course. Hey, that's you. Monday, October 5th.
Yes, yeah,
Civic Spirit. That's it, right?
yeah. Yeah, and Alex, I'll send out the modules tomorrow. I think you'll have some fun with them. You'll see some of your wisdom that you sprinkled in. So I'm sorry I missed tonight, but more to come.
So glad you showed up even at the end. Doesn't matter. I'm so
It
glad.
was really nice. Really, really nice.
Again, I'm
Lindsay,
trying to
what's your
hide.
alumni year so I can put that in the email?
I've double. So I graduated with my BA in 2002 and my
Okay.
master's in public health in 2010.
That's a
Amazing.
form of,
And I was on the Hillel board. I was very dedicated. Everything I am is because of UCLA Hillel. So
Oh my God, I love it. Double Bruin.
double Bruin for life. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Until one day when my kids, God willing, go, and then I become a triple Bruin.
Yay! You're multiplying as we said,
Yeah.
doubling, whatever. Okay. All right. We can't ignore it anymore. It's happening. It's really
Yes. Yes. All right. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Bob.
bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Alex.
Of course.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, Shana Tova,
Shana Tova.
good week. We'll just